The skies over Germany on December 20th, 1943, were a battlefield unlike any other. American bombers flew in tight formation, their mission to cripple the Nazi war machine by destroying factories and infrastructure. Among them was a B-17 bomber named Olde Pub, piloted by Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown, a 21-year-old farm boy from West Virginia, on his first combat mission. What happened that day would remain hidden for over 4 decades. A story of humanity that transcended the brutal logic of war. The mission started like many others. The 379th Bomb Group took off from Kimbolton Airfield in England, heading for a Focke-Wulf aircraft factory in Bremen. The weather was brutal, with temperatures dropping to minus 60 degrees at altitude. As they approached their target, German anti-aircraft fire erupted around them. The sky filled with black puffs of flak, each one capable of tearing through aluminum and flesh with equal ease. Olde Pub took a direct hit to the No. 2 engine. Then another shell struck the nose, killing the navigator and wounding the bombardier. Despite the damage, Brown held formation long enough to drop their bombs. But as they turned for home, disaster struck. A swarm of German fighters pounced on the wounded bomber, riddling it with bullets. The right wing was nearly severed. A third engine failed, and the tail gunner was killed instantly. The oxygen system was destroyed, and hydraulic fluid sprayed throughout the aircraft. With half his crew wounded or dead, Brown struggled to maintain control as the B-17 fell from formation. The remaining gunners fought back desperately, but the situation was hopeless. The bomber plummeted toward the ground, and Brown blacked out from lack of oxygen. By some miracle, he regained consciousness just 1,000 feet above the ground and managed to pull the aircraft level. But they were deep in enemy territory, flying at treetop level with a severely damaged aircraft. Meanwhile, Oberleutnant Franz Stigler was refueling and rearming at a nearby airfield after already completing 2 sorties that day. With 27 confirmed kills to his name, Stigler needed just 1 more to earn the Knight's Cross, one of Germany's highest military honors. When he spotted the crippled B-17 limping past, he quickly took off in his Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighter to claim an easy victory. As Stigler closed in for the kill, he could see the extensive damage to the bomber. Through the gaping holes in the fuselage, he observed wounded crewmen tending to each other. The tail gunner's position was empty, the guns silent. The bomber was defenseless. In that moment, Stigler faced a profound moral dilemma. His finger hovered over the trigger that would bring him glory in the eyes of his superiors. But Franz Stigler was not just a fighter pilot. Before the war, he had been a commercial airline pilot, and his brother had been killed earlier in the conflict. More importantly, he had been mentored by one of Germany's most respected aces, Gustav Rodel, who had told him, "If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you down myself. You follow the rules of war for you, not for your enemy. You fight by rules to keep your humanity." Looking at the helpless American bomber, Stigler made his decision. Instead of firing, he pulled alongside the B-17 and tried to catch Brown's eye. When their gazes met, Stigler gestured downward, trying to tell the American pilot to land at a nearby German airfield. Surrender was the only reasonable option. The bomber would never make it back to England. But Charlie Brown refused. He and his remaining crew would rather risk death than become prisoners of war. Seeing this determination, Stigler made an extraordinary choice. He nodded to Brown and took up position off the B-17's wing. He would escort the bomber to the North Sea, protecting it from both ground-based flak batteries and other German fighters. For Brown and his crew, the sight was bewildering. Why would an enemy fighter pilot spare them when they were such an easy target? They watched in disbelief as Stigler flew alongside them for several minutes, guiding them toward safety. When they reached the coast, Stigler saluted Brown, banked away, and disappeared back toward Germany. The decision could have cost Stigler his life. Had any German witnesses reported his actions, he would have faced a court-martial and likely execution for treason. He never reported the incident and claimed his guns had jammed when asked why he returned without a victory. Against all odds, Brown managed to nurse Olde Pub across the North Sea and back to England. The bomber was so badly damaged that it never flew again. When Brown reported the incident to his commanding officers, they ordered him to keep quiet about it. Fraternization with the enemy, even in this unusual circumstance, was not something the military wanted publicized during wartime. For 44 years, both men kept their secret. Brown wondered about the German pilot who had spared him and his crew. Stigler, who emigrated to Canada after the war, wondered if the Americans had survived their journey home. Neither man knew the other's name or if they had survived the war. Then, in 1986, Charlie Brown decided to try to find the German pilot. He placed notices in aviation newsletters, seeking information about the incident. By remarkable coincidence, Franz Stigler, now living in Vancouver, came across one of these notices. He immediately wrote to Brown, describing details of the encounter that only the German pilot could have known. In 1990, the two former enemies met in a reunion filled with emotion. They embraced like long-lost brothers, connected by an act of mercy that defied the hatred of war. Stigler explained his actions simply. "I didn't have the heart to finish those brave men. I flew beside them for a long time. They were trying to get home, and I was going to let them do that." The story of Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler teaches us something profound about humanity. In the midst of the most destructive conflict in human history, where killing was not just permitted but expected, one man chose compassion over duty. One man remembered that even enemies are human beings. After their reunion, Brown and Stigler remained close friends until their deaths in 2008, just months apart. Their story was eventually documented in the book A Higher Call by Adam Makos, bringing this remarkable tale to a wider audience. What makes this story so powerful is not just the dramatic encounter in the skies over Germany, but what it reveals about human nature. Franz Stigler could have easily shot down the crippled bomber. He would have been celebrated for it, awarded a prestigious medal, perhaps even given special privileges. Instead, he risked everything: his career, his freedom, his life, to spare men he had never met, men he was supposed to kill without hesitation. The incident raises profound questions about the nature of war and the choices we make when faced with moral dilemmas. How many similar acts of mercy occurred during World War II that we'll never know about? How many soldiers on all sides chose humanity over hatred, even briefly, in the chaos of battle? For Charlie Brown, the encounter changed his life. He had been ready to die that day, fighting to keep his shattered bomber in the air long enough to reach friendly territory. The appearance of the German fighter should have been the end. Instead, it became a beginning, the start of a story that would take decades to fully unfold. Franz Stigler's decision that day came at a cost. By not shooting down the B-17, he missed his opportunity to earn the Knight's Cross. But in the years that followed, as he reflected on his actions, he never regretted his choice. "I didn't go to war to shoot down crippled airplanes," he later said. "I didn't go to war to shoot down parachutes." The friendship that developed between these former enemies in their later years stands as a testament to reconciliation. They visited each other's homes, attended air shows together, and shared their story with audiences around the world. Two men who had once tried to kill each other became inseparable friends, bound by a single act of mercy. Their story reminds us that even in our darkest hours, humanity can prevail. It reminds us that the choice between what is easy and what is right defines who we are. Franz Stigler could have easily pulled the trigger that day. Charlie Brown could have harbored resentment toward his German counterpart for decades. Instead, both men chose a different path. As we look back on World War II, we often focus on the grand strategies, the famous battles, the political leaders who shaped the conflict. But sometimes it's the small, personal moments, a split-second decision made by an individual soldier, that reveal the most about our capacity for good, even in the worst circumstances. The encounter between Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler lasted only a few minutes, but its impact has endured for generations. It stands as a reminder that even in war, there are moments when our common humanity transcends the artificial boundaries that divide us. It reminds us that courage takes many forms. Sometimes it's charging into battle, and sometimes it's refusing to fire when you have every reason to do so. In the end, perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this story is how ordinary both men were. Charlie Brown was a farm boy who became a pilot because he wanted to avoid infantry service. Franz Stigler was a civilian pilot who joined the Luftwaffe because his flying skills were needed. Neither set out to become a hero or to teach the world a lesson about compassion. They were simply two men caught in the machinery of war who, for one brief moment, saw each other not as enemies, but as fellow human beings. Their story continues to resonate because it offers hope that even in our most divided times, individual acts of decency can make a difference. Hope that the human capacity for compassion can survive even the most brutal circumstances. Hope that enemies can become friends when they recognize their shared humanity. As we face our own challenges and divisions today, the lesson of Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler remains as relevant as ever. Sometimes the greatest courage is shown not in destroying our enemies, but in recognizing that they, too, are human beings worthy of compassion and respect. Sometimes the most powerful act is not to pull the trigger, but to fly alongside someone in need, even if just for a moment, even if they wear a different uniform. The next time you find yourself facing an enemy, whether in politics, in business, or in personal conflict, remember the story of these two pilots. Remember that beneath the labels and ideologies that divide us, we share a common humanity. And remember that sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is to choose mercy when hatred would be easier.